N64 had its fair share of games that never saw release in America, typically for the usual reasons, like a game being seen as too Japanese to do well in America. And out of all the games not to see release in America, the most famous one would have to be Sin and Punishment. Created by Treasure Games, who at the time were famous for their stylized action games, Sin and Punishment seems to have been made for an international release. However, by the time it was finished and ready to go, the N64 was on its way out, thus Nintendo decided not to bother. Not exactly sure why though. I mean, I understand that localization can be costly, but the only thing they needed to do was translate the text into English. For whatever reason though, Sin and Punishment would stay in Japan, and though it would still develop a cult following amongst importers, it was basically unknown. Then after a bit of exposure in 2007, Sin and Punishment would finally find an international audience, slowly becoming one of the famous hidden gems of the console's entire library. In Sin and Punishment, well, I'm sure something happens, but I have no idea what. I can discern a few things. It seems to take place in a dystopian future where humanity is fighting some kind of alien force. There seems to be a group of fascists fighting the aliens, but oppressing the civilians in the process. Some people are rebelling, some people seem to gain powers through blood transfusions with superpowered beings. One of the main characters turns into whatever the hell this thing is. Yeah, I have no idea what is going on here. I mean, I do, but it's not because of the storytelling here. It's because I read the Wikipedia page, and even then I feel lost and confused as to what the narrative is here. Typically when I complain about issues with the story, I complain about slow pacing, but in the case of Sin and Punishment, the pacing is too fast. It doesn't take the time it needs to establish the world it takes place in, the characters we follow, the relationships between them, and why any of this is happening at all. It starts, it ends, and that's about all she wrote. So let's leave that nonsense behind and jump straight into the presentation, which is just outrageous. The amount of action that can take place on screen at once without the frame rate taking a hit is simply insane. I thought Star Fox 64 was rad in this regard, but Sin and Punishment completely trumps it. It actually gets to the point where it becomes overwhelming, which is both something to be admired and annoyed with. I just wish the art direction was a little better. The color is sparse and what little is there is muted. Some of the character models also look like mangled roadkill at times. Sometimes it does feel like it is a little overdone, but it's mind-blowing nonetheless. Some excellent sound design too. It's fun to blow stuff up, the voice acting isn't half bad, and the soundtrack just rocks. Treasure was certainly pushing the N64 to its limits, and it's a shame that it took Nintendo so long to let Americans see what they had done.
Saki! Oh, Saki! Good morning, Saki.
Good morning, Iron.
The gameplay is really unique. The game is in a sense an unreal shooting game where your character moves along a set path and you have to shoot the targets as they come at you. However, Sin and Punishment is one of those games that adds a wrinkle to that setup, as it's not just about pointing and shooting. You also have your character on screen and have to move them around hazards and incoming fire. It's an extremely rare setup that you don't see a whole lot. The only other examples I can think of are the Punisher on the NES and Wild Guns on the SNES, both of which are actually pretty good, but they got nothing on Sin and Punishment. This is mostly due to the sheer level of creativity that is present throughout the game. Though the game is constantly having fun with camera angles and scenarios, the game never deviates from the fact that the characters have to move on a 2D plane. As a result, it never feels repetitive or stale, and is perpetually exciting. The gameplay is surprisingly complex too. You'd think it would just be running and gunning, but there are some risk and reward elements as well. In addition to your gun, you also have a close-range melee attack that can annihilate enemies. At first, you think it's just for those instances where enemies get too close for comfort, but later you realize that if you melee strike certain projectiles, you can actually send them flying back towards whatever you are aiming at. The trick is actually achieving that though, because as I said, the game has a tendency to overwhelm the player. It's almost a third-person bullet hell shmup with the amount of shit you are expected to deal with. It's so crazy that the game has a lock-on function so that you can train your aim on a specific target and focus on movement. Even then, you're probably going to see that game over screen a few times before you make it to the end of the game.
Ouch! Iron. Please continue.
So Sin and Punishment is a very good game, but it still has some shortcomings. As I said, the game has a tendency to overwhelm the player. I get the sense that that was what Treasure was going for, but it does border on being unfair a lot of the time. The game is also a little obtuse with what you're supposed to do at times, which is annoying because everything is on a clock, and once the clock reaches 0, you start to lose life, which obviously means death if it hits 0. The biggest issue for me though is the length. Sin and Punishment is only going to last you a few hours, and though there is some replay value with higher difficulty levels and playing again to get a higher score, I never found myself playing this game over and over again like I do something like Star Fox 64. This is also a problem because Sin and Punishment is going to run you a good deal of money if you want to play on hardware. You either need to import a copy from Japan and modify the cart so that it will fit in an American N64, or get yourself a repro, both of which are going to run you between $50 and $100+. It's a good thing that Sin and Punishment is available via Switch Online because while the game is great, it is not worth that kind of money. So yeah, much like Panzer Dragoon Saga, Sin and Punishment never got a chance to succeed due to the timing of its release. The game would be relatively unknown outside Japan up until 2007. I guess Sakurai was a fan of the game because he would have a character from the game appear in Super Smash Bros. Brawl as an assist trophy. This got people talking, and soon there was demand from Nintendo to make the game available for Americans to play. So Nintendo would add the game to the Virtual Console, where it proved to be a big seller. It did so well, in fact, that Nintendo would commission Treasure to make a sequel for the Wii, Sin and Punishment Star Successor. Star Successor would end up being a big hit with the critics, but I think it underperformed because there hasn't been a game in the series since. It hasn't even been re-released on the Switch, which I feel would be an easy port. Still, while it is a bummer that Sin and Punishment seems to be fading back into obscurity, it is nice that Nintendo hasn't completely forgotten it. If you're a fan of the console, you need to play Sin and Punishment, as even in such a star-studded lineup of games, this little gem still shines very brightly.
Get bonus!